introing or? Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Middleton Places Plugged into History. It is Let's Talk Tuesday, and this week is Spring Planting Week, and we have Jeff Neale, Director of Preservation and Interpretation, here with us again today, and he's going to tell us a little bit about rice. Now, rice is a great topic for spring planting as a theme for the week because, of course, places like Middleton Place wouldn't exist without the rice cultivation and trade. But today we're going to talk a little bit about harvesting. So while harvesting might be more of a fall activity, of course, rice would have been planted around this time of year. So Jeff is going to get more into that, and then Bob will tell us all about that tomorrow. So thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for being plugged into history. This is Let's Talk Tuesday, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. Make sure, everybody, that you ask questions, that you let us know that you're watching. Anything that you have questions about, we are happy to send to Jeff for answers. So, all right, Jeff, take it away.
All right, well, good morning. Welcome to Middleton Place. We got a beautiful day out here. We're actually coming to you from the Middleton oak, which is right here behind me. This tree is roughly about 1,000 years old. I always look at it and think, man, if it could only talk, who knows what it could tell us out here. But more importantly, the Middleton oak is overlooking this body of water here. Now, if you kind of look out here, you'll see the Ashley River. That's that far little kind of line of water that you see. And then you see this grass or this bankment here. And then you see this body of water. That is a rice field. Now, keep in mind, this field that we're looking at, this is all man-made. All right? And it was made for one purpose, and that was for the growing of rice. Rice here is the crop that basically changes the low country. You know, a lot of times when we talk about rice, we're always thinking about it as a commodity, as a cash crop. But we got to remember, the first rice that was grown here in South Carolina, all right, well, it wasn't grown to be sold, wasn't grown as a cash crop, and it wasn't grown, I would argue, by white planters. It was grown by enslaved Africans, and they're growing it purely as food. Right? This is being grown in those provisional gardens, in many cases that they're allowed to have. Okay? So first and foremost, rice was food here in South Carolina. But then later on, within that first 30 or 40 years of the colony, suddenly it becomes a commodity. It becomes a cash crop. Okay? And the question is, well, why? All right? Well, I think there's several reasons. One, when the Lord proprietors are starting this colony, they're looking for a way to make money. South Carolina was formed to produce, okay? And they try all kinds of things. They're trying to grow grapes for wine production down here. They're trying to grow silkworms to make silk. They're doing citrus. They're doing olives. They're trying everything to try to make something work, okay? And they quickly latch on to two commodities that become really big. One is cattle. And the next one, well, it's timber, right? These are big cash crops. But then suddenly, this grain is introduced, all right? This grain that we know as of rice. And this changes everything. Why does rice take off here? Well, one, there's a demand for it. This is going to become part of a global market for South Carolina. Most of the rice that's grown here is going to be shipped out. A lot of it is going overseas. This is being used in the military overseas for Great Britain. It's also going to be used aboard ships because this is very portable. Next, the one thing we have to remember about South Carolina is that when this colony was first formed, this is nothing but marsh, waterways, rivers, streams, everything. And there's not many crops that can grow in it. Rice, being a vascular plant, can grow in this environment. It can grow in this water. It doesn't necessarily need to. You can do upland rice, which we're going to show you tomorrow, but it can grow in this. So this is a crop that takes off. Let me give you an idea of how much this is going to change everything. In 1700, the first commercial crop of rice, they're going to ship out roughly about 12,000 pounds. And again, the vast majority going overseas. Not too bad. By 1770, a mere 70 years later, they are shipping out almost 83 million pounds of rice. By 1860, they are shipping out on an annual basis almost 140 million pounds of rice here in the Low Country. Now, as that rice production grows, guess what grows right beside it? Number of slaves. It was said for every one enslaved person you have on a cotton plantation, you need 10 on a rice plantation. This is extremely laborious, plus there's some hazards which we're going to discuss in this. Okay? Now normally with this field, once this has been cleared out, and keep in mind, again, this is all being done by hand. Okay, the first thing that have to be done is either a canal would have to be built around it to catch this water coming in from the river, and then right after that, an embankment would start to be built so we could block this off. Then all the marsh, all the trees, all the stumps, everything would either be burned and then dug out or being pulled out either by men with axes and shovels, probably using oxen as well to pull these things out. And then once that is all cleared, all right, then they would start to put in gates. All right, so we could bring water in, whether it's coming from the river or in the case here, they may have also used what is called reservoir rice growing, which means they're bringing water in from a different source, which was probably across the road here at Middleton Place.
And Jeff, how big is this field that enslaved people hand built?
This one we're looking at, this is roughly probably, I would say maybe about 20 to 25 acres. Okay, we have 3 rice fields like this on the riverside property here at Middleton Place, and those 3 fields together total about 62 acres. Now on the opposite side of Middleton Place, across Highway 61, those are the inland rice fields, the provisional fields over there that were probably built sometime around, I would say close to the American Revolution. That is inland, and there's probably several hundred acres over there. Okay. Now, once this rice is planted, it takes about 5 months. Okay. So let's say if we planted right now in April, we're probably looking roughly about September. All right. The rice here, you'll see, it's going to get up to about my shoulder. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to drain all the water off this field, make sure that we can get in there without getting stuck in all the mud and everything. Once that field's done, they're going to go into that field, and we're going to use our first tool here. This is called a rice hook, or basically it's a sickle. They're going to go in and they're going to start cutting this rice. All right. Now as they cut, what they're going to do is we're going to leave about a foot of stubble, because as soon as we cut that handful of rice, I grasp with my left hand, cut it, we're going to lay it, and we're going to let this air dry a little bit. We're going to let it cure for about, roughly a day or so. All right. Now keep in mind, the way these rice plantations work, they use what is called the task system. Okay, and what that basically means is that there's a certain quota given to each enslaved person to do a day. In cutting rice, if we look at Henry Augustus Middleton's plantation, he owned the Weehawken plantation up near Georgetown, right? His daily task, and this task should take someone anywhere from 8 to 9 hours to complete, was 3/4 of an acre you had to harvest. Now, if you were going to harvest and also tie the ricks together like I've done, you only had to do a 1/2 acre, okay? So you see that task is delegated to not only the ability of the person doing it, but also the type of work that they're doing, which works extremely well on a rice plantation, all right? Once that's done, all this rice would be taken out and be taken to what is called the threshing floor, or the threshing yard, all right? And we'd lay the rice down here like we've got. I put down a black tarp so you can get maybe a little better idea of what we're going to see. Now the rice is on the panicles, like I showed you. And what we're going to take is our next tool here. This is called a flail, all right? Basically, it's a staff, okay? We have a rope, which is what we call the swivel, and we have what is called the bob. And what we're going to do is we've laid the rice down, and they would normally lay this down in rows. And enslaved people, and this would be men and women doing this, they would walk between the rows, taking this flail, and we'd beat the rice. And as you see me beating it, see some of that rice already popping off of it? We're knocking it off those stalks. We're knocking those panicles off. Okay? So we've just done a little bit here. We're just giving you an idea of what this looks like. By the way, Henry Augustus Middleton's task for this on the Weehawken, all right, was men were to beat 500 sheaves a day. Women would do 400. All right? Again, this is probably a full day. We're probably looking to 8 to 9 hours to do. This is extremely laborious. Now, once we've beaten it, what they would do go through is they pick up the straw here. All right? We're going to shake it. See the rice coming off? There's our panicle. Now, some of these panicles, I don't know if you can see, some of these panicles here, like this one, for example, see it's already cracked. I've cracked that with the panicle, with the flail here. That's okay, because inside this golden hole, and I'll peel one off here so you can see better. That's my rice. That's my food. Okay? Now, some of this rice we want to use for seed. And for the seed rice, we don't want to break the hull. If it breaks the hull, it's going to go bad. So what they would do, instead of using the flail, they would lay sometimes logs, or you would have what was referred to as a threshing board, which is basically just a piece of wood, and they would take the rice and they would beat it manually by hand. This is a more gentle way of doing it, and you would still knock off the panicles, but you're not cracking the hull. Okay? So once that's all done, we got that. We check out the rice. We got our panicles here. This would all be swept up. We would control it. And Arthur Middleton here is assisting me. I get the feeling this is something he probably didn't do in his time, but he's going to help today. This is the rice. Now this is what we call rough rice. And keep in mind, this is two things, like we said before. As long as that hull's on it, okay, that golden hull here, and by the way, this is Carolina gold. This is the type of rice we grow here in our demonstration field at Middleton Place. It was developed roughly about the late 1700s, okay? There's a lot of varieties of rice, but this was considered, matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson said this was the best rice ever produced, all right? As long as that hull's on it, this is my seed for next year. This is also pourable. This is going to keep it. But as soon as I take that hull off, it's food. All right, now the question is, how do I get the hull off? Okay, well, we're going to turn to another tool. Matter of fact, we're going to turn to one of our first West African tools. The thing to remember about these enslaved people working these rice fields, this is labor. Matter of fact, this is quite a bit of labor. However, this is skilled labor. There's a certain bit of not only technology, but there's a certain bit of knowledge that these people also bring. And when you combine their expertise, their skill, their knowledge, you combine that with the planters' work that they did in processing seed and building these canals and these water systems, instructing these mills we'll talk about. When you put those two things together, that's where you have this rice kingdom here in South Carolina. Okay? So, we're going to turn to our first African tool, a pestle and mortar. Now some of you may be saying, well Jeffrey, other cultures use a pestle and mortar. You're exactly right. Matter of fact, Native Americans are using this very much for milling corn or maize. However, in West Africa, this was primarily for food, or shall I say, for rice. And that brings me to one other point we need to point out about these enslaved people. The vast majority of the slaves brought here to the Low Country during the 18th century, they're coming from the coast of West Africa. Okay? Now there's many reasons why they're looking for people from this area. Okay? Some planters or some slave traders will say that people from this area, well, they had the characteristics that they were looking for, that they didn't seem to fight back as much, they were easier to control. Some pointed to physical characteristics, that the people in this region, that they were big and strong and muscular. And matter of fact, that these enslaved people were dark. Matter of fact, the darker the better, because the belief of the day was, that's what lets you work in this Carolina sun all day. Me and you know better, but that's the belief of the time. But there's another, probably more important reason. The people in this region of West Africa, they have been growing rice for centuries. They have the skill, they have the knowledge, they have the ability to make this work. Okay? So, we use this tool, the pestle and the mortar. The mortar here, here's the pestle. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit, I've already got some in here, but we're going to take a little bit of rice, we're going to stick it inside the mortar. Okay? And then using the pestle, since I want to, what we're going to do is called pounding the rice. Now, pounding's a little bit of a misnomer. I'm not really pounding it. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get these grains of rice to rub against one another or rub against the side of the mortar so I can take out that hull, because I don't want to damage the rice. All right? So using my pestle here, we're going to use the pointed end. This is for bruising that hull. I'm going to take it and I'm going to start pounding. Okay? Now, if you come a little closer, you can look inside and you could already see that hull's already starting to come off. Now, there's a little difference of me doing it and these enslaved people 200 years ago doing it. Number one, there would be a whole lot more rice in this mortar. Okay? Generally speaking, that full task, all right, was 7 mortars full. Okay? Now again, this can be a little bit misleading because mortars can be tall and skinny like I have, or they can also be flat and kind of shallow. All right, so the amount you have in there could vary. Roughly what historians have estimated is that 7 mortars full equals about 40 pounds of rice. Again, this would be done by men, this would be done by women. Depending upon their skill, this may take a full day. This could take 8-9 hours. Also, this could also take maybe just 4 or 5. Again, depending upon the level of the person doing this. And again, this is probably the hardest part of the rice processing. And I know, Karen mentioned we're doing this spring. Here's the thing to remember. Once this harvest is done, depending how much rice, the processing, the pounding here, could well go into March or April of the next year, just because of the amount of work that it takes to do this. All right, I think we've done enough pounding. Let's take a look. Let's see what we got. See the rice? Now, we've got some broken stuff here, which we would call Midland rice, which is not very good, but that's all right. I'll take what I can get. Okay, now you notice I got all this trash in it, the chaff, parts of the straws mixed up in it, those holes all mixed up. I got to get this separated. All right, we're going to turn to our next West African tool, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is this sweetgrass basket. Okay, I'm sure if anyone here has ever come to Charleston, you've seen these. All right, they're down in the market for sale. I don't know what, the mortgage on your first house, basically. You know. Now, they're made pretty much the same way. However, the one thing you have to remember, the baskets made 200 years ago for rice production usually were made out of bulrush. Okay, they were a lot bigger and, shall I say, also a lot more sturdier, because this is a tool. This is not for just, storing fruit or cheese and crackers or something like that. So it's made just a little bit differently here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and I'm going to take these handfuls of rice, and I'm going to put it in the basket here. Okay, I'm going to put it at the lip of the basket. I'm going to step back here a little bit, and what I'm going to do is called fanning or winnowing. All right? What that means, I'm going to take this, I'm going to toss this. Kind of like when I do this with people, when I show them how to do it, I'm always like, it's like flipping a pancake or flipping an egg in a skillet. Okay, you want to use your wrist, not so much your arms. What we're going to do is we're going to flip this. I'm going to toss it back to me. And as I do this little bit of breeze I have, plus I'm going to create a little bit of a breeze, you're going to see this chaff start to fly off. Okay? So we got it here on the end. We do a flip. And we keep flipping. And I'm just going to turn back. See that chaff coming off? Yeah. All right, it's starting to fly. I'll help it out a little bit, give you a little blow just so you can see. All right, we're losing a little bit of rice, but that's all right. Now let's take a look. See the rice? Remember what went in. That's what went in. This is what's coming out. Okay, now we still have some unmilled pieces. So what this would be done, this would be put through some wire screens or some sieves so we could separate the unmilled from the milled. Also, sometimes the broken rice would be separated as well. We take what we had milled, put it separately, take the unmilled, put back in here, okay? Now, let's take a look here. So this is what I'm ending up with, okay? There's our pounded or milled rice. Now, if you'll notice, looks kind of dirty, doesn't it? All right, it's not like the rice we see on the table, all right? That's because it's got this oily bran covering on it, all right? Essentially, this is brown rice. This is what you and I buy today in the store, all right? This oily brown covering is extremely nutritious. This is probably the best stuff in the world for you. There's a problem though, okay? Remember what we're doing with this rice. We're shipping it. Matter of fact, the vast majority of it is going to be shipped in barrels, all right? Here's what the planters quickly find out. You place this in a barrel, all right, with this oily bran covering on it. Within, let's say, a week's time, this goes rancid. You lose your crop. You lose your profit. Everything's gone, all right? So what do? We got to take this bran off, all right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this wonderful rice that we just did, and we're going to throw it back into the mortar here. Okay, we're going to take the pestle, and this time we're going to use the blunt end, because I'm not going to pound the rice or rub it against one. What I'm going to do is polish the rice, and this is probably the hardest step. All right, so it's going to be the same motion, but this time it's more, I always think of it more of a rubbing motion. okay? And what I will do, so we'll do the polish. So just to kind of give a little time-lapse photography here, because this takes a while, that goes in, that comes out. Now that looks like probably what you and I have on the table that we're more familiar with.
Can we see them side by side?
Sure. There we go, there's the difference. And really, I know from my eye, I mean, I know it's the brand and everything, but to me it's just, it looks cleaner. This looks like something I would rather eat than this, I'll be honest. You know, just from the aesthetics of it. Okay, so all of this is going in. Now, planters quickly realize something. For, let's say, roughly the first 100 years of rice production, 75 to 100 years of rice production, this is how it's done on almost every plantation, okay? The harvesting of the rice with the hook, the threshing with the flail, the pounding and the polishing with the pestle and mortar. And here's what planters realize. Number one, this is not an efficient way to run a cash crop. If you're doing something for your home, you're just making it for your family, this probably works pretty well. But doing this as a cash crop, trying to be as efficient and get the most money and the most product that you can, this doesn't work that well. Okay, as you noticed, especially when I was fanning, I was losing a lot of rice. A lot of it was I was spilling it. It's going all over the place. Also, when we pounded, we had a lot of the broken rice in there. All right, that broken rice is what's chipped. They want these perfectly grains like you saw in that polished rice. All right. What do you think happens to that broken rice, just by the way? Huh? Well, some of it uses animal feed. Some of it is, a good portion of it is actually giving to the enslaved person. All right, this helps make up part of their ration, what was referred to as this Midland rice, you know? And here's what I always think. If slaves are getting the Midland rice, the damaged rice, and it's going towards them, you think they may be breaking some on purpose? The more that gets broke, possibly the more they get. It's a possibility. And I say that not only for them to take advantage of the situation, it's also a form of resistance in a way, if you think about it, okay? Well, planters quickly realize that it's not an efficient way. And number two, they also realize this is taxing their enslaved population. This is wearing them out, all right? And keep in mind, not only do they have gardens, these rice fields to plant, provision gardens here, there's other things that have to be done on this plantation as well. So this is taking up a lot of time. It is also wearing them out, okay? So come about the late 1700s, what they start erecting out here are rice mills. These are humongous industrial machines. And everything that we talked here, except for really the harvesting with the hook, and I would also say the flail, the threshing until maybe the later part of the 19th century, that's still done by hand, but the pounding, the polishing, and even some of the winnowing is happening all the place in these mills. Okay, and that's really what helps take production off. Now, here's the thing though. Many of these planters, they live at places, they don't have a mill available to them. Either they don't have the money or the capital to build one, or they just can't get to one. So, what they do is they continue the same way that we said. And this will actually occur all the way up into the later part of the 19th century. Even I've seen some films in 20th century. Keep in mind, commercial rice planting is done in South Carolina by I would say the 1920s. But we've actually found evidence, matter of fact, there's been some films discovered from the 1940s of just families harvesting rice, and they're still doing it this way, okay?
We did have a question earlier, Jeff. Can you spell for us panicle?
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. I didn't know it was going to be a test.
I know. Okay. I'm sorry.
I'm P-A-N-N-I-C-L-E.
That's what I would have guessed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't quote me on that, but I think that's correct.
Put that in your Google machine and see if it comes out as the Hull of Rice, guys.
Now, we talked about all this work here, but there's other problems with this whole process here. If we go back to this rice field here, okay, there was a gentleman in about the mid 1800s. He tours the low country and he visits a lot of rice plantations, and he wrote down what he saw. And here's what he said about a rice field like the one that we're looking at. He said, for the enslaved people, for the slaves that work in this rice field, this is the most unhealthful thing that a man can do. Number one, he says they're in a constant state of moisture. They're either standing and working in mud or they're standing in water, all right? They'll develop such things as ringworm, trench foot. Also, with this cold water and things, also other diseases will come in, pneumonia, things like that. Also, this water here that we have, even though the water is changed out periodically, and we have different phases of the flow of water, this water pretty much is stagnant, and it becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes, which yellow fever and malaria is rampant. Okay, now those two diseases, they do not discriminate. They go after everybody. However, because of these enslaved people being so close, working in this field, and here constantly by this field, they're probably suffering more from it than anyone else. Okay? Secondly, with this water not only producing malaria and yellow fever, also other waterborne diseases like cholera is rampant within the enslaved community. You also have dysentery is another problem. And you combine that with, in many cases, their poor diet that they're getting, the inadequate shelter, the inadequate clothing they're wearing, and you throw this on top, right? This field, as one historian put it, this is a cesspool of disease out here, okay? However, I always think this always occurs to me, despite all this, 140 million pounds by 1860. That's incredible. I know when I come out here and I look at this rice field here, when I look at the 3 rice fields out here, I understand this is done in bondage. This is forced labor. There is a lot of suffering, there's a lot of blood spilled on this, all right? However, look what they created. This is amazing. Despite all that, this is a testament to these people's skill, to their ability, to their perseverance. This is amazing what they were able to accomplish here with this, you know. Yes?
Question about alligators.
Alligators! Well, we do have some natural dangers in this field. Okay, we do have alligators. Matter of fact, we can see quite a few out in this rice field today.
If y'all look straight ahead there's one right there. Look just above my finger.
Our demonstration rice field that myself and a couple other gentlemen work in is about 1/4 of an acre. Okay, we do get alligators in there from time to time. They will mostly get in the trenches or the canal, shall we say, within the field. It's been my experience, an alligator sees you, he's going to get the heck out of Dodge. Okay, he's going to leave. All right, you don't have to worry too much about him. Matter of fact, there's not, to the best of my knowledge, there's no historical cases of anything like that happening in a rice field with an alligator. However, snakes, that's a little different, okay? I can't remember the exact number. There's something like, I think there's like 6 types of poisonous snakes in South Carolina. And guess where we can find all 6? Right here they are. All right. I know going to the people I work with in the rice field, they often refer to me as the snake whisperer, because if there's a snake in the field, I'm going to find it. All right. And that is a problem. That's a humongous problem. But again, probably the most dangerous animal in that thing are mosquitoes. That's probably the biggest. Also, if you can imagine these fields, now we talk about the planting and we talk about the harvesting. All right. I would argue the big work is happening after that, because all these fields, after that harvest, everything's got to be cleaned out. All these drainage ditches, all the trenches, everything's got to be cleaned out. That mud's got to be removed out of here. It's got to be as clean as possible. All that stubble, whether it's burnt or plowed over or however, that's all got to be taken out. And that's probably some of the nastiest work. And keep in mind, a lot of that work is taking place in January and February. All right? It very rarely snows here in the low country, but it does get cold. Matter of fact, we do get to freezing. So if you can imagine having to work in this field in these freezing temperatures, and you know that water, again, as I said, pneumonia, other diseases are rampant out here with the work that's being done here. Yes, another question.
Stephanie would like to know, what was the average amount of years that a person worked in the rice field?
Wow, the average amount of years. That's an excellent question, and that's one we can't really give you a solid answer to. I have seen estimates that for a person that was solely a field hand in a rice field, that the average lifespan is somewhere between about the ages of 25 to about 32. Okay? It's going to greatly vary. Now, if we look at the rice fields here in Middleton Place, we say 62 acres. To be honest, that's pretty small. That's extremely small. If we go to one of the other Middleton plantations down on the Cumbie, all right, let's say Holbonny, for example, there we're looking at about 500 to 600 acres of rice cultivation. And we're also looking at a much larger enslaved force as well, okay? So another thing that has been said, and I don't know if we can go, I don't know if this is certain, but I've heard a couple historians argue that in a typical growing year, okay, a planting, harvesting, and processing for a planter, that he could expect to lose somewhere between 5 to 10% of his workforce. They will either be too sick to be able to do anything, or many of them will just expire. They will die from it, okay? Now, if you think about it, in my research and reading a lot of these plantation journals, these letter books from planters, there's one thing that's always interesting. Most of these letter books involve letters between themselves and their overseers, the people that are actually managing the plantations. And in almost every letter, I swear you can find 3 things. Doesn't matter how long the letter could be, 1 page, it could be 3 pages, but these 3 things are going to pop up. Number 1, how's the rice crop, okay? Or how's the fields? How are they doing? Number 2, how's the mill? Is it operating? Evidently, from what I can tell, these mills break down all the time. And number 3, what is the health of the enslaved workforce? What is the status of the people? Okay. Now this is part of their business for them. Okay. I wouldn't say it's necessarily. I can't say it's not. There's no benevolence in it. However, it's more concerned about, am I going to get this crop out? You know, I think the ruling factor out here in everything is the bottom line is the bottom line. Okay. This is your money. This is the crop. There's a reason, you know, we call it Carolina gold here. It's because of that. Many people say it's that golden hue of the hull. Very true. But it's also gold for something else. This is money. Keep in mind, by 1860, all right, by 1860, there are roughly 4 million slaves in the United States. But there's only 14 people, 14 persons who own 500 or more slaves. Okay, there's only 14. Guess where 8 of them live and what they do? They live here in the low country and they are rice planters. Okay, these gentlemen not only need that large workforce, but they also are some of the wealthiest people. You know, and they transform this wealth that is performed by this enslaved force, and they turn this into cultural power, they turn it into political power, all kinds of things. But it's all stemming from these fields. You know, I also think it's funny, we talk about the malaria and the yellow fever coming from these fields. Well, Arthur Middleton, okay, our signer of the Declaration of Independence, who called Middleton Place his home, he dies January 1st, 1787. He dies what we believe is from malaria, or the effects of malaria, or what they refer to as ague. And I think it's a little ironic that the fields here that are giving him his wealth, that are helping him acquire that cultural and political power, they also end up ending his life as well. Okay? There's always that give and take, shall we say. You know, it's a little ironic in a sense. Yes.
Well, if anybody has any further questions, make sure to drop them in the comment thread here.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out for tomorrow. We're going to show, there's basically 3 ways of growing rice, okay? You have, as we looked at here, you have what is referred to as tidal culture, where they use the tides of the rivers to flood and drain the fields. You have reservoir culture, or sometimes it's called inland swamp culture, shall I say, where they're using reservoirs, build up water to bring in. And then you have what is sometimes referred to as upland or provincial culture, which basically is rice planted on the high ground, and you're basically looking at rainwater, or shall we say moist soil, to be able to grow this crop. And that's what we're going to show you tomorrow. We're actually going to do it in a little small patch garden that we have in the stable yards. My colleague Bob Sherman, who is going to be out there, and he's going to show you not only how the rice is planted, but we'll talk about the different ways that it would have been not only planted, but the whole cultivation process as we go through it as well.
That's great. One last question I see here. How many plantations did the Middletons own?
How many plantations did the Middletons own? Well, we count 19 primary plantations. Okay, the reason we say primary plantations, these are the plantations we know a little bit more about. They existed for a while. We know the number of enslaved people on them. We know what was produced on them. However, there's probably, I would throw in another 7 or 8 plantations that are very small that we know about, we have very little information on, okay? Keep in mind, these were all, the vast majority were here along the coast, here on South Carolina, though we have a few in the interior as well, Cook's Mouth, for example. there as well. So we're looking at, we refer to as 19 primary plantations. And we always like to say, if you take those 19 primary plantations, we put them together, they'll encompass about 63,000 acres. And the Middletons, and now this is over about a 200-year time frame. And within that 200-year time frame, the family will own approximately 3,500 slaves to run those plantations. And again, the vast majority of those plantations are rice plantations.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Everybody, we appreciate y'all being here. Thank you for joining us under the Middleton Oak for our first day of the spring planting week. And we're talking about Carolina gold rice here, right by an extant 18th century rice field. If you missed earlier parts of this Facebook Live, that's no problem. Just wait for it to process and you can go back and watch again. And as Jeff mentioned, tomorrow is On the Farm Wednesday, and we will be showing you how to plant, or rather some different ways that planters here planted rice. I'm not sure that it would necessarily be something for your home garden, but anyway, in case you're very ambitious, you might give it a shot, the upland style. So right here again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you all so much for the shout outs. We see you from all over the country, from New England and from Texas, from Maryland and from right here in South Carolina. We see you all. We thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for participating. Thanks for being part of Plugged Into History. We will see you tomorrow. Help us keep history alive, guys. Thanks.